You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Rockies. This is Sarah Jane Maroney, your host for Engage the Rockies, your go-to podcast concerning local and state issues for Colorado. Today, we'll be speaking with Brian Risley, member at large of the Colorado Springs City Council. His diverse background and broad set of experiences brings significant value to his role on City Council. A native of Colorado Springs, Brian was born and raised here and knows the values, goals, and expectations of Colorado communities, and he knows what obstacles the Front Range has faced as it has grown. He has been directly involved in numerous issues facing our region over the years through his civic service on many boards and committees. Through his work with many local municipalities, Brian clearly understands the nuances and inner workings of local government, both through his role as the chair of the El Paso County Planning Commission and his professional involvement as an architect and planning consultant. Brian has a commanding understanding of land use matters from all sides of an issue and has a track record of skillfully finding compromise and building consensus around complex land use projects. Brian is passionate about combining his professional expertise with targeted volunteer opportunities to positively impact community and drive measurable results. We welcome him. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share some information about the upcoming election.
Yeah, well, it's on the 1st of April in 2025, and evidently today, candidates can go down to City Hall and pick up packets. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep, the packets are available today, and I believe 50 signatures are required on the petitions, and those have to be turned back in January 21st, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And did you always want to be a city councilman when you were a little child?
No, definitely not. I'm not a politician. I don't ever want to be a politician, but I certainly am passionate about our community and have spent a lot of my adult life giving back to the city of Colorado Springs. I'm a native, born and raised in Black Forest, and have always been a part of, just involved in community across the region in a lot of different ways. Everything from the chair of the El Paso County Planning Commission to members of remember on a number of different boards and committees, and involved with a lot of nonprofits as well. And so being involved with City Council was largely a natural extension of my volunteerism and passion for trying to do the right thing for the community.
And how was that? I mean, obviously, you're still in your first term. What's it like to have to go out and raise money and put your name on signs and things like this?
Yeah, the campaign process for me was very unique. Again, never having run for any sort of an elected office before, I didn't know what to expect. I hired a very well-known campaign manager, and I listened very carefully to her input and advice and really tried to follow her guidance as it related to how to run a campaign and how to go out and obtain campaign financing. Again, because I had been involved in the community and been a part of what's going on for such a long period of time, it was pretty easy to rely on my network of folks to support me both financially and otherwise. But I think my campaign raised about $100,000 in total, and I don't know if where that ranked as far as what's typical or what most at-large candidates raise, but it's certainly a different experience to run at large, which is what the role that I serve, as opposed to running for a district seat. I think the issues that we face sort of citywide are of greater concern for candidates that run at large, where district representatives are more focused on specific issues in their district. So, for example, something that might be important to the southeast part of Colorado Springs may not really register to the northwest part of Colorado Springs or to the fast-growing eastern fringes of Colorado Springs. So folks that are running in those different districts would have different considerations and as a result would model their campaigns differently than someone like me running at large for the entire city. As an extension of that, I think the amount of money that someone raises for a district race is probably different than the amount of money necessary to run an at-large race. Again, for at-large candidates, it was more about name recognition and trying to reach all 500,000 residents within Colorado Springs, as opposed to a district where you've got 80 or 90,000 people that you're trying to reach. And again, much more of a targeted audience and a targeted message to resonate with the issues that they're facing or dealing with in a specific area.
And I understand that there are 3 seats up for election. Is that correct?
There are actually 6 district seats that are up for election right now. We know for sure that 3 of them will be new council members. Mike O'Malley
Okay.
has signaled that he is not going to run for re-election, and Council President Randy Helms has also indicated that he's not running again. And then Yolanda Avila is term limited, so she can't run again. So there will definitely be 3 new city council members in April. There are 3 other district seats that are also up for election. So Michelle Tallarico in District 3, Dave Donaldson in District 1, and Nancy Henjum in District 5. I'm not sure the status of those 3, if they plan to run again or what their intentions are.
But each one of them is up for could have a second term.
Correct. Yep. So depending on how things shake out, we could have a majority of new council members.
Wow. Okay. But we haven't heard from those other 3 as to whether they're going to be running a second term or not.
I have not. I've heard from Michelle that she's likely not going to run again, but I don't know that for certain, and I don't know for certain what Dave Donaldson or Nancy Henjum are planning to do. I'm pretty sure that both of them are going to run again, but again, I don't know that as a fact.
I haven't seen anything either in terms of whether they are or not. So it's kind of a question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And would they follow? So I had someone once when I was knocking a door sort of say, well, why isn't the person just automatically on the ballot? And I kind of thought, okay, because those 3 council members would have to go and pick up package just like everyone else all over again.
That's
correct?
My understanding. Yep. Yeah. My understanding is that they would have to go through the same process as candidates, regardless of whether they're an incumbent or not. So they would have to pick up the packets, get the 50 signatures on the petition, turn those in by the deadline, and obviously go through the same process that any other candidate would go through.
And do you think that what kind of a time commitment is being on city council?
Well, it depends. It really is a matter of how, I think, what most people are passionate about or interested in and how much time they feel like they can contribute. So a number of us currently work other full-time jobs. I own an architecture firm, and so I'm busy with my company. And Mike O'Malley, for example, chose not to attend work sessions because of his commitment, his job with the federal government. So we all sort of find our balance and find our ways of contributing where and when we can and need to. But I would say that, on average for me, I probably spend about 30 hours a week on city business, and then another, 30-ish hours a week on my business. I know, Michelle Tallarico and Dave Lineweber are both trying to balance that as well and run their businesses and also be contributing members of council and active in the community. So it's definitely a balancing act.
Do you think that, you get a whopping stipend of something like $6,000. Do you think every time, according to the city council clerk, every time that it's been asked, could we give you more monetary compensation, voters are like, no, don't pay them more. But do you think that if there were better financial compensation for the job, that more people would come forward? I mean, obviously you guys are juggling quite a lot with full-time jobs, businesses, and then in addition, city council duties.
It's a really interesting question, and I've kind of vacillated back and forth where I land on that. I initially thought that the reason a person should be on city council is because of their passion for the community and their willingness and desire to give back, and not necessarily for financial gain. I still don't think that financial gain should be a motivating factor or a major driver. I don't think we want career politicians who are chasing, 6-figure salaries at city council. But as we grow as a community, the issues we face, the amount of time and effort it takes to address and deal with various situations is greater today with 500,000 residents than it was, 20 years ago with 200,000 residents. And so I think as the city grows in size, dealing with the issues that we deal with and having more of a professional, so to speak, group of decision makers at the helm becomes a factor. I would also say that there are a lot of really great folks out there that are reluctant to run for city council because they still need to have an income and support their families financially. So I'm kind of leaning now toward the idea that if we were to have a reasonable salary. Let's say it was the median income in Colorado Springs, and it could track with that median income number. That very likely could draw a large number of, again, very committed, very talented, very passionate, very intelligent members or candidates that would be interested in being part of city council, and then could kind of quit their other full-time jobs and still support their families. So the challenge becomes, obviously, Colorado Springs, El Paso County is a very sort of tax-averse, a small government community, and I side with that. I'm very, fiscally conservative as well. But again, I think you have to look at what you're getting for an investment, and whether an investment in city council pay would pay dividends in the quality of leadership and the number of candidates that we could attract. So it's a balancing act for sure. As I said, I am at this point sort of leaning toward the idea of some form of compensation for council members, solely because it would allow us to attract a greater number of really qualified candidates.
In terms of your time on city council, what do you think the greatest challenge that you faced has been up till now?
I think there are a number of different challenges. I think the forward-looking piece or forward-facing piece that probably most people are aware of are concerns that we get from citizens regarding things like the Ford Amphitheater, or homelessness downtown, or other potholes in streets. I mean, all of the kind of the big topics, public safety issues, all the things that folks come and talk to us at council meetings about. So that's one piece. But I think behind the scenes, there are all kinds of other things that most people probably aren't aware of or attuned to or even know, or considerations. And some of the things that I spend a lot of my time on, in addition to those things that I just mentioned, I'm working behind the scenes with the business community on economic development and finding ways of speeding up the development process, speeding up and increasing efficiency with how businesses operate in Colorado Springs. And I spend a lot of my time, again, working with folks on how to address homeless camp cleanup in their backyard, and dealing with encampments on private property for the developers and business owners are contending with. So there's never an end to the number of issues and the types of issues that we deal with. And again, I would say that a lot of what I spend my time doing is more behind the scenes, as opposed to what you may see me saying or doing from the dais.
Interesting. So what would you say to someone who is today you can go down and get a packet. Most people are intimidated by the idea of running and having to raise K or less if it's in a district, a specific district. What would you say to them to encourage them that it is actually something that's possible and enjoyable even?
I think the people that are even considering running, I would hope that they're doing it for the right reasons. I would hope that they're doing it because they really are passionate about doing the right thing for the city, and are doing it because they want to give back to the community. I would say that selfishly, sitting members of council are looking for folks that are reasonable and rational and level-headed in their thinking and sort of moderate in their approach. I, for one, certainly would prefer to serve with fellow members that are willing to look at all of the facts of a given situation and be moderate about them, and not, take ideological stands or take positions solely based on maybe what a small group of people are telling them is important, and rather look at the greater good for the community and what really makes the most sense for the city, both today as well as down the road. I think that's a big part of what we are charged with doing, is thinking about the type of legacy that we want to live or leave, and think about the type of community that we want to build. And it's easy to get hung up on kind of the here and now and short-term thinking. And so I would encourage candidates to, really consider what the long-term legacy of Colorado Springs should be, and what their legacy is that they want to leave, and how they want to contribute to crafting the future of our community.
Beautiful. And what's the best thing about being on city council? Like what has touched you most in terms of an interaction with a community member, or something that you've been able to impact?
Again, it's more the behind the scenes things, knowing that I'm able to help somebody get their business up and running faster, or knowing that I've been able to create some economic prosperity for a company moving to Colorado Springs, or knowing that when a company expands, it's putting food on the table for families. Those kinds of things to me are the most rewarding aspects of what we do. I would also say that, again, this is sort of being the father of a teenager, sort of a personal thing, but one of the things that we did recently was put in place some ordinances around retail or recreational marijuana and the magic mushroom psychedelic products. And I understand that there is a place for those in society. I am concerned, though, about how that plays out with younger people and people at risk. And so I think the ordinances that we put in place create some guardrails, and I'm proud of that. I think that was an important thing to do because it signals who we believe we are as a community to the rest of the state and the rest of the country. And the reason that's important is because obviously we have a huge military presence in El Paso County, and the federal government is watching. They're looking at what our local laws and ordinances are with regard to things that are still considered illegal at the federal government level. That's a huge piece when it comes to the military community and to maintaining Fort Carson and Peterson Space Force Base and Schriever and the Academy. So those are things that I'm not sure that I would say that being proud is the answer, but being happy that we were able to accomplish.
Could you go into that a little bit more? Because it was a little bit confusing on the ballot. There were two different measures that seemed to contradict one another. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure, there were two different measures. One was put forward by a citizens group, and the other was put forward by City Council. So the one that City Council backed would make it illegal to sell marijuana recreationally in Colorado Springs. The one that was written by the citizens group seemed to me to be confusing in the way that it was written, and I would maybe go so far as to say it was intentionally difficult to interpret. And I think that was intentional so that people would potentially vote for it, not understanding what they're voting for. So, for example, one of the things that was in the citizens group measure was talking about 1,000-foot limit or setback distance from schools and some other facilities. So it made it sound like if you vote for this, you'll be limiting the locations where this is available. But at the end of the day, what it was written to do was to legalize recreational marijuana. So we did have two competing ballot measures. But regardless of that, one of the things that City Council was able to do and is actually required to do is put boundaries around where, when, and how any of those kinds of substances are sold. So we enacted through our legislative power an ordinance to limit the sale to beyond a mile from schools and treatment facilities and other sort of sensitive places. And regardless of whether the city-backed initiative or the citizen-backed initiative was approved, that legislative ordinance that we passed at City Council would still, we believe, trump kind of either of those, because it, again, was not about legality or not, but about regulating location. And so that's what we were able to accomplish earlier this year.
Wonderful. So finally, I guess I kind of asked earlier about whether you would encourage someone to run or not, considering how daunting it is. But what would you say if you have a platform to say anything to someone who's maybe considered it, but gosh, it's a lot of work, even though they have the right motives, as you pointed out, like that they're a native here, they've been here a long time and really love Colorado Springs. What would you say to encourage them to go ahead and skip on down and pick up a packet?
I would say that if someone feels like this is something that they want to do, they'll know when the right time is to get involved, and they will know that they've got the right backing and support, and that they are hopefully doing this for the right reasons. And I would encourage them to really think about what those right reasons truly are. If it's about trying to disrupt the process or be combative with the community or, cause disruption and be divisive, they may think they're doing it for the right reason. In my view, that's not the right reason. The right reason is to move things forward, not to necessarily get in the way of the process and progress. But certainly, the voters will decide what types of leaders they want, and they'll decide who the who the right folks are to move the community forward, which ultimately is a decision about what type of a community we want to be. And I know some people have a lot of concern about growth and other people have a lot of concern about sort of status quo. And I think the right answer is somewhere in the middle. In order to be a prosperous and vibrant community, we do need to grow. And I'm not saying necessarily grow in terms of constant building, but that's a piece of it. But we have to have economic vitality and economic prosperity. And the way you achieve that is through velocity and churn and momentum. So going backward in time is not an option. Sitting still, in my opinion, is not an option. The old adage that either you're growing or you're dying is true. And if you look at communities that have chosen to not grow, they have retracted, and that's where we get ghost towns, right? You can look at a lot of the Midwest communities that were tied to the automotive industry and refused to adapt and change. And unfortunately, they sort of went by the wayside. I don't want to see that happen for Colorado Springs. And so I want to see a fresh batch of city council leaders that are willing to embrace what our future can look like and start moving it forward along with me and others.
Wonderful. Well, maybe after the election, we'll have you back to talk about your new batch of council members.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, for your time. We really appreciate your insights.
Thank you. Appreciate your time as well.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.